Thank you, Ginger. So you might think that was Ginger Coyle singing Turn, 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 which was originally done by the Byrds, or that it was written by Pete Seeger. Or you may actually know that that's one of the few pop songs that came directly out of Scripture. The lyrics for that came directly from Ecclesiastes, which is part of the Old Testament, and it's used in the celebration, in the Jewish tradition, of Sukkot. Today is Erev Sukkot, which means Sukkot starts tonight at sundown. So all of those pieces are fitting together. Everything is fitting together. There's a season, there's a reason, and it's time to turn, turn, turn. Which kind of brings me to the topic of today's talk, which is about action-adventure movies. All right, actually it's not about action-adventure movies, but there is a scene in every movie where either the good guy or the bad guy is trying to escape from either the bad guy or the good guy, and they're running down here and they're jumping over this and they're trying to escape, and eventually they're boxed into a corner and the person who's doing the chasing says, "Drop it." Now, half the time they keep on chasing, in which case nothing changes. But in other cases, the person who's holding the gun drops it. Or who's holding, we saw National Treasure last week, who's holding the Declaration of Independence, drops it. Or holding the vial of nitroglycerin. Different story. The point is, at that moment, at drop it, when they drop it, the story changes. Drop it is a turning point where I go from what I've been doing now, which was having a chase, to whatever's going next. We all have those turning points in our lives all the time. And the cool thing about Sukkot and fall is that nature is reminding us that drop it is a natural part of evolution. It's a natural part of life. So all the trees have been out there all summer, putting out their leaves, taking in sunshine, using photosynthesis and chlorophyll and all those stuff that you learned about in elementary school and middle school to bring life to them. And those leaves have been the source of their life energy. And now they're turning brown and going to turn really pretty colors soon, and they're going to fall off. It's time to drop it. Well, trees are pretty good at doing that. Me, not necessarily so much. There are times when I don't want to drop it. This has been going along really well for me, and I'm not that interested in dropping it. We've had this great prayer work story from Max, who decided when he was a little kid, he's 20, he's still a little kid, but when he was little, he wanted to work for SEPTA. He wanted to drive a bus for SEPTA. And a couple of weeks ago, he got a job with SEPTA. He's driving a bus for SEPTA. And it reminded me of one of my stories. When I was a little kid, growing up in North Jersey, there were two radio stations that were competing for number one. And one was the dominant winner. This was like AM Top 40 radio. It was WABC, and they were it. And their underdog competitor was WNBC. And I, of course, liked WNBC better. That was my station. And as I got into middle school and then high school, I got interested in television production and audio production, and I knew that I wanted to be in broadcasting. And I set the intention of working for NBC and being involved in WNBC, this AM station that I loved. And we would go in and take the tour of the NBC studios and get up to the second floor, and there's glass windows, and you're looking into Studio 2A and 2B, which is where they were broadcasting WNBC with the disc jockey and the engineer. And so every time I went on the tour, it's like, wow, that's cool. I'd love to work here someday. And I went to college, and between my junior and senior year, NBC, which was a union shop, of course, had 14 engineers, and they all liked to go on vacation, as union engineers like to do. So they needed to hire fill-ins to cover shifts in the summertime. So I got a job as an engineer at WNBC, and I would go to work at 30 Rock and go up to the second floor, and the people who I'd been listening to for years and years, I was now working with. So I got to be colleagues with Imus And that was so cool. That was the best job ever. And then school started up again, and I needed to go do other things. And the next summer, when I could have done the same thing again, it just wasn't going to work out. I really, really, really wanted to go back to NBC because it was cool, and that was like the best, and it paid really well. But it wasn't right for me. I had to drop it. And I have some friends who went back and worked there every year and then got hired full-time. One of them is still working at NBC as an engineer, not in the radio side anymore, because they don't have that anymore. So he's had to drop a few things. But his path has been to do that same thing that he'd been doing and kind of growing along in that path. And I went into the radio biz, and I went into the graphics business, and I did marketing, and I became a minister, and I moved all over the East Coast, and I've done different things. And along the way, I've had lots of best jobs I've ever had. I didn't know that they could be even better than that first one that I had. And they keep on showing up and keep on being new opportunities. And along the way, even when something's going really well, it comes to an end, I'm invited to drop it. And sometimes I am holding on so tight, I don't want to. No, 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 I've worked so hard for this. I deserve to keep it. All of those other objections that I come up with. And then at some point, it's time for that next cycle of evolution, for everything to turn for me. And the reason that I bring this up isn't so that I can tell my own story. It's because we all have the same story. There are two trees in my yard. There's a bunch of trees in my yard, but the two that I'm telling the story about now are the dogwood tree that's been there for a long time and the oak tree. Now, the dogwood tree is the first one to put out its flowers in the springtime. And sometimes they're white and sometimes they're pink, and you can't tell which it's going to be because it's the pH of the soil. And it's just a surprise. It's an early spring surprise. And the oak tree just does its oak tree thing with those big old leathery oak leaves, and fall starts and it starts pelting the ground with acorns. Well, it's really early in the fall. The dogwood tree is like, here are my leaves. They're all over the yard already. Now, I know from experience the oak tree will not let go of its leaves until March. This is the most stubborn tree I could imagine. I don't know what's going on for this tree. There are a few of them in my neighborhood. I think there's like a family that has separation anxiety or something. And that's okay, because they're both in their divine order, going through their process, going through their cycle, being okay. And eventually, they will both get to the point where they're going to drop it and let go. Because you know what happens after that? Yeah, there's winter, which is a little bit desolate and sometimes unpleasant. Not that long for the oak tree, since it waits until March. The leaves aren't doing much from about November through March, but it's holding on. The next thing that happens is the new growth happens. There are the buds and the sprouts, and the new leaves come along, and that cycle of life continues again, and the tree gets even bigger. I don't know what the oak tree thinks about, or if it thinks about anything, but I remember probably 8 or 10 years ago, I wanted to have an oak tree in my yard, and we were having some landscaping done, and they were taking out a pine tree, and there was this sapling growing. And the arborist said, we'll take that out too. I said, that's an oak tree, can you just leave it? He says, oh, volunteer, sure. It's now 35 feet tall. The oak tree wasn't planning on growing next to the pine tree, and it wasn't planning on getting taken out, and it wasn't planning on anything. It's just there. The invitation that we always have is to put our attention into the experience that we want to be having. In the case of the tree, it's I want growth. I want to be able to express myself and share something new and wonderful. In your case, it's I can't tell you what's for you. I don't know. But I do know that if I'm telling the universe, this is what I want to have, and this is how it has to look, and that's the person who needs to do it for me, and you're filling in all of the details, what you're doing is you're holding on to your idea of how it ought to look. And the invitation here is to what? Drop it. Drop it. When it's working for you, when you have succeeded, when your prayer has been answered, when all of those things that you want to have in your life are in your life, how are you going to feel? Who are you going to be hanging around with? What are you going to be doing? Focus on that. Not the idea that you have in your head about, I want to be having that job or that relationship with that person in that house. I want to be able to, for the job, I want to be able to share my gifts and my skills and my talents. Offer myself up, share my time, and be richly, abundantly, generously compensated for it. Because when I take that step back, what happens is I can get that great job, I can get the best job I ever had, and by not being completely attached to it, I can then evolve into the next best job I ever had. With better colleagues, a better opportunity, more money, whatever it is that that's bringing to me, better hours. We need to pray for Max to have Sunday mornings off. When we're wanting to have a relationship, and we're pointing at that person over there. I want to have a relationship with that person, and I want it to be this and this and this and this. What's happening is our ego is telling us what we want to have happen. If I want to be having that sort of relationship, then I can use that as my model, as my idea. I want to have a relationship like this with someone like this, that feels like this. And then step back and open up. And drop all of the expectations about how it's going to happen, or what it's going to look like, or what the details are going to be. And open up to that possibility. So the other thing about dropping it is dropping from up here to in here. Let go of your head's idea, your ego's idea of what it ought to look like. And open your heart. Open yourself up to whatever it could be. Because when we do that, there's an invitation for the universe. And the universe has this great sense of humor. The universe says, in effect, oh, I'll see your desire for joy, and I'll raise you too. Better than you could have expected. Repeat that after me. This is better than I could have expected. This is better than I could have expected. One more time. This is better than I could have expected. That is the way that we drop it. This is better than I expected. We're letting go of the expectation. Because you know what? If you have an expectation and you cling on to the expectation, how is it possibly going to be any better? If there's a limitation that's coming from that, where's the limitation coming from? Me. If I don't believe it could be any better than this, then how's it going to be? Because if it starts getting better, I'm the one who's pulling it down. So I want to let go of that. I want to drop it from my head to my heart to open myself up to that possibility of it being even better than I could have expected. So what do we have to do with the expectation? Drop it, right? You've got to drop the expectation. Now that's different than the intention. The intention is for the experience I want to have, the feeling that I want to have when I'm doing that. I drop that into my heart. I don't let go of it. Anybody know the difference between desire and passion? Desire is kind of something that you're looking for, that's out there, that you're reaching for. Passion is just that absolute joy in being in the process of doing whatever it is that might be leading to that or might not. So follow your passion. Drop all the other stuff. Maybe because somebody tells you that you have to. Maybe because the universe keeps on banging into you that, no, this is something that you need to do. Or maybe because you are in that evolutionary change, that growth, that process where you can take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out, drop the things that aren't serving you anymore, and allow something new to come into your life. There's one other way that this whole drop it thing comes into our experience. and it involves the F word, forgiveness. When something happens and we're upset by it, feel victimized by it, minimized by it, we get into that situation where they done that to me. And it can be anything. I've been in situations where people who I've been working for or working with set up a situation where I can no longer possibly succeed, and it's time for me to leave the organization. It's happened with jobs, it's happened with churches, it's happened to me on more than one occasion, which possibly has something to do with me. So that's my process. I get to work on that. And I've had conversations with lots of people who have found themselves to be at the low end of a power dynamic, where I want something and somebody else wants something different and they have all the power and I'm down at the bottom and I can't do anything about it. So you may have found yourself in a situation like that, or you may know somebody who's been in a situation like that. And it is so difficult at times to let go of whatever that damage has happened, because what happens is when whoever it is, the person in the organization at the top of the power dynamic does something, the person who's at the bottom is being victimized because they don't have any power. And there have been times when I have absolutely felt that. And in a spiritual, universal sense, I have felt powerless. And I have to remind myself that that's not true. We start every practical prayer reminding ourselves that there is one power and presence that creates everything, and that we are part of that creation. We are part of that infinite one. So we have that same power to create a new experience. And that's where our belief system comes in. And that's what practical prayer is all about. And that's why we're talking about the workshop and why it's so valuable to come to that workshop next Saturday, to learn how to put some traction on that, so that we can start having those different results that we're looking for. But we get into a situation where forgiveness is going to be required. Here I am down at the bottom of the power dynamic with these people who have gotten away with it because they've done something and they're still doing what they're doing and I'm now no longer involved. Or somebody's been victimized, whether it's physical abuse or financial abuse or withdrawal of love. There's so many different ways that it can show up. Forgiveness is not telling whoever that was that it's okay. It's not going to the person who dumped you and saying, it's all right. It's not about forgetting. Never mind. Just pretend it never happened. Forgiveness is all about letting go of the energy. I had a girlfriend broke up with me when I was in college. I could still have energy about that. But she's off having a life with a husband and a kid. It doesn't have anything to do with me anymore. So if I'm letting that undermine my life, then who's still being hurt by that? Me. That's what forgiveness is about. Forgiveness is letting myself off the hook for being in a situation where I could be victimized. I'm forgiving myself. I'm forgiving the situation, not condoning whatever horrible behavior they had. They can still go on being horrible. My girlfriend wasn't. Some of the other people I've dealt with are. You're playing by your own rules and your own story. You get to decide just exactly how horrible they were. But don't let that control the story. You can tell when it's happening when you wake up or have a distracted thought. And that same feeling that you had whenever it was that it happened comes back. Oh, I'm victimized. Oh, I'm less than. Oh, I don't have the power. I don't have the love. I don't have the whatever it is that you don't have, that you were convinced at the moment that you don't have. When that feeling comes up again, remind yourself that's only happening inside of your mind. That's only happening inside of your awareness. The other person hasn't changed anything. You don't need to do anything to them in order for you to be okay. But that's very powerful. That's the power of forgiveness, to take that energetic dynamic where somebody has done something that's made you feel compromised. And when you drop it, You're dropping that energetic connection so that you can go on having the life being who and what you are, which is a divine and perfect expression of God's infinite love. A divine and perfect expression of God's infinite love. Sometimes having a less than perfect experience. But always that divine and perfect expression of God's infinite love. Please, 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 drop everything else and remember that truth. Let's say that together. I'm a divine and perfect expression of God's infinite love. I'm a divine and perfect expression of God's infinite love. One more time. I am a divine and perfect expression of God's infinite love. And you deserve all good right now and always. God bless you.